The funeral had just ended, but the house still clung to that heavy lingering scent, bleach, lilies, and the faint smoke of extinguished candles. It coated everything like a cold film of air, seeping into the fabric of the curtains, the cracks between floorboards, the very bones of the walls. I thought 10 years of caring for his bedridden mother would finally come to an end. That the long, joyless stretch of my life had reached its final chapter. I thought, even without passion, Robin and I could at least grow old together, quietly, hand in hand. But as we sat at the table, he didn't even glance at me. His eyes were locked on a plate of untouched appetizers. And then out of nowhere he said, "Let's get a divorce. This just isn't working and it's not worth it." 10 years. For 10 whole years I nursed his paralyzed mother. I never once slept through the night, never watched a movie all the way through, never lived a single day for myself. And now all of that, 10 years of my life, was brushed aside with 3 hollow words: not worth it. In that moment, those years felt like the punchline to a cruel joke. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just looked at him and said calmly, "Okay." He thought I'd beg. He was wrong. I pulled out my ledger, laid out every asset, and didn't give an inch. He signed the divorce papers faster than I did. I took what was rightfully mine and walked out of that house, out of the prison I'd mistaken for a home. 1 year later he showed up at my apartment door. Disheveled. Broke. Crying. Begging me to take him back. But life doesn't hand out do-overs. There's no medicine for regret. The day had been exhausting, but the funeral was finally over. After seeing the last group of relatives out, the house fell into a sudden eerie stillness. It was just me, Robin, and our daughter Kathy. The air still carried the scent of lilies, the sharp sting of hospital disinfectant, and the faint smoky aftertaste of burnt candles, like a dense fog pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I felt like I was falling apart, not from physical exhaustion but from something deeper. A kind of fatigue that had soaked through my bones. Like a rubber band stretched for 10 years, finally snapping, limp and useless with no strength to bounce back. 10 years. So many nights I sat by her bedside, flipping her over, changing the sheets, staring blankly at the moonlight outside the window. I used to ask myself, how many decades does a person get? They say even an iron rod can be ground into a needle. But my heart had grown layers of calluses from endless bedside care, from sharp words and colder silences. What I hadn't realized was that underneath those calluses, the flesh had already worn away. Kathy came over and gently took my hand. Her palm was warm. Mine was ice cold. "Mom," she said quietly, "you don't look so good. Why don't you go lie down for a while? I'll take care of this." Kathy had graduated college years before and was working as a magazine editor in San Francisco. She'd always been thoughtful, almost heartbreakingly so. She'd seen everything over the years, but there wasn't much she could do. I patted her hand and forced a smile. "I'm fine, honey. Just tired." In my mind I was thinking, now that she's gone, maybe things will finally ease up. That weight I've been carrying on my chest for a decade, it's gone now, isn't it? I still felt lost, but somewhere deep inside, there was the faintest flicker of hope. Maybe Robin and I could find some warmth again. Maybe the days ahead could finally be mine. And Robin? At the funeral he acted like the picture of grief. Wailing, chest heaving, tears streaming down his face. The relatives clung to him saying, "Robin, you've got to be strong. Your mother wouldn't want to see you like this." To them he looked like a devoted son. A heartbroken man. But I saw it clearly. Behind those red, puffy eyes, there was no sorrow. What I saw instead was relief. A quiet, guilty sort of freedom. The look of someone who had just set down a heavy load they'd carried too long. They all said he was a good son. Only I knew how little time he'd actually spent by her side these past 10 years. It's not that he was never home, he just always had an excuse. Work trips, too much going on, couldn't get away. More often than not, he'd sneak out to drink or stay home to snap at me, blaming me for not doing enough, saying the house felt dark and depressing. Once the relatives had left, the house felt even emptier. Like even a single cough would echo off the walls. Robin sat on the living room couch, chain-smoking. One cigarette after another. Smoke curling around the ceiling. He didn't say a word. Didn't even look my way. I quietly started packing up her things. Folding her worn clothes, putting away the mug she drank from, the little jars of pills. Each object so ordinary, yet each one a key to a memory I didn't want to relive. 10 years. Waking up at 5 every morning to puree her food. Washing her, changing her pads, massaging her legs, applying ointments, wheeling her out to the balcony for some sun. Waking multiple times each night to turn her, change diapers, prevent bed sores. These things, who could ever truly understand? There were moments I just wanted to give up. To walk away. But every time I saw her cloudy, helpless eyes looking up at me, I held on. I told myself she's human. He has a heart. And so do I. I believed that if I gave it my all, Robin would understand. That even if he never said it, he'd feel it in his heart. I really thought he would. Dinner was takeout. Kathy had ordered something simple. The three of us sat around the dining table, but none of us had much of an appetite. The dining room was so quiet you could hear every breath. No background music, no clinking of silverware, just a thick, uncomfortable silence hanging in the air like fog. Robin barely touched his food. After a couple of bites, he set his fork down and didn't say a word. Slowly, deliberately, he lit a cigarette. The smoke curled around his face, masking his expression. It felt like a fog wall had formed between us, separating us into two different worlds. He sat there in silence for a long time, tapping his finger against the table. Tap, 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 like he was rehearsing something in his mind. Finally, he looked up, though he still wouldn't meet my eyes. His gaze drifted to the air vent above the window, and when he finally spoke, his voice was too calm, too controlled, like he'd practiced flattening the emotion out of it. Linda, I think we should get a divorce. At first I thought I'd misheard him. It felt like a swarm of bees had taken over my ears, buzzing so loudly my mind went blank in an instant. I stared at him, waiting, begging, to see a trace of a joke in his face. Even just a hint of a smirk. Anything. But he wasn't smiling. He was dead serious. He paused, maybe sensing his reasoning sounded too weak, and added, "What I mean is, the truth is, whatever we had between us, it's been gone for a long time. We only stayed together because of my mom. Now that she's gone, there's no reason for us to keep holding each other back." Gone? No reason for holding each other back? It was like lightning cracked straight down the center of my skull. I felt a jolt shoot from the soles of my feet up to the back of my head. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even sadness. It was ice-cold heartbreak. 10 years of sacrifice, and all he had to say for it was we were just getting by? For 10 years I'd been like a workhorse. Cooking, feeding, bathing, changing diapers at 2 in the morning, just trying to keep our family afloat. And in his mind I'd been nothing more than a placeholder. Now that his mother was gone, I was just an extra. Disposable. Let's call it what it is, he used me. I was free labor, and now that the job's done, he's kicking me out like some worn-out tool. No gratitude. No second thoughts. Just done. Dad. Kathy slammed her chopsticks down on the table with a sharp crack, her eyes blazing with shock and fury. How could you say something like that? Mom took care of Grandma for 10 years. 10 years. Do you have any idea what she went through? And now, right after the funeral, you want a divorce? Do you even have a conscience? Robin flinched at her outburst, the muscles in his face twitching. Then just as quickly, his expression twisted into irritation. He waved his hand like swatting away a noisy fly. Stay out of grown-up matters. You don't understand a thing. But Kathy didn't back down. Her voice shook with anger. Don't understand? I grew up in this house. I watched Mom hold it together all these years. Getting up in the middle of the night to give meds, changing sheets, feeding your mother, doing her laundry, massaging her legs. And you? Where were you? Do you know how many times she woke up every night? And now you say there's no love. Where was that honesty 10 years ago? Robin's face was turning red now. His voice rose. I said this is between your mother and me. Stay out of it. Watching them argue, I felt strangely calm, like an entire frozen lake inside me had started to crack. Shards of ice splintered and fell into dark, unmoving water beneath. I was done. I took a deep breath, swallowing the fury and the humiliation clawing at my throat. I lifted my head slowly. My voice came out cold, eerily calm. Fine. I agree to the divorce. Robin blinked. He wasn't expecting that. He probably thought I'd react like I used to, quiet, hesitant, begging him to stay. Whatever speech he'd rehearsed, his justifications, his accusations, it all caught in his throat. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His stunned expression lasted only a second before calculation crept into his eyes. I could practically see the gears turning. She gave in too easily. She must be desperate. She'll be easy to squeeze in the settlement. He cleared his throat, switched to a measured, almost generous tone. Well, if you feel the same way, then let's keep this simple. As you know, the house originally belonged to my parents. We did renovate it after the wedding, but the deed should really be considered mine. He tapped the table with his finger. There's not much left in the account. We've spent most of it over the years. I'll take 2/3, you take 1/3. I'll keep the car, after all, I still need it for work. He paused, then offered a smug little smile as if expecting a round of applause for his magnanimity. And of course I can throw in some extra support. 50,000. Sound fair? 50,000? Was this a charity handout? Or did he just think I was an idiot? I stared at that smug, calculating face, and whatever lingering affection I had evaporated on the spot. Not anger. Not even pain. Just disgust. I didn't say a word. I stood up, walked to the bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my nightstand. I pulled out my ledger along with years' worth of receipts, invoices and a photocopy of the house deed. Back at the table, I dropped them in front of him with a thud. You think I'm stupid, don't you? My voice was quiet but sharp enough to cut glass. This house is joint marital property. The title has both our names on it. If you want to argue it belongs to your parents, you're going to need a will or some kind of legal proof. I flipped open the ledger and pointed to the densely packed rows of handwritten records. Look here. For the last 10 years, your mother's medical bills, nursing expenses, nutritional supplements, Kathy's tuition, the mortgage, utilities. Which of these didn't I keep track of? You know exactly how much of your paycheck went where and who actually covered the rest. I'm not stopping you from divorcing me. But the house. Either we sell it and split the profits or you buy me out at market value. Bank accounts, investments, retirement funds. Everything gets divided according to the law. And as for the 10 years I spent caring for your mother with no pay, no benefits, no sleep, I'll be seeking fair compensation for that too. I locked eyes with him, steady and firm. You don't have to agree. That's what court is for. He really thought I couldn't survive without him. He was wrong. I stayed all these years out of duty. That duty is gone now. What I want is compensation. And no one, is walking away with what I earned. He opened his mouth again, ready to protest, but nothing came out. The numbers in that ledger were as clear as an audit. For the first time I saw panic flicker in his eyes. And just like that he realized. The woman he thought was soft, compliant, easy to control? She didn't exist anymore. The night I agreed to the divorce, the house felt like an icebox. Not a word was spoken. The next morning Robin called his sister. I didn't hear everything he said, just that he stayed on the phone a long time, wearing that familiar look of wounded martyrdom. That was his specialty after all, painting himself as the victim. I'm sure he didn't tell Jane how the numbers played out, or how coldly he dropped the news. He probably told her I was rehashing the past, unwilling to forgive, and impossible to reason with. So when the doorbell rang 2 days later, right around 3 in the afternoon, and I found Jane on the porch with 2 grocery bags in hand, I wasn't the least bit surprised. She wore an apologetic smile and held out the bags. Some fruit, frozen pizza, a couple bottles of wine. I figured you probably haven't had the energy to cook lately, she said gently. So I brought a few things. After she sat down, she rubbed her hands together, glancing between Robin and me before she finally spoke. Linda, she said quietly, Robin told me a bit about what's been going on. I know you've had a tough few years. We all saw how much you did for Mom. Really, we know. She paused, then softened her voice even more. You two have been married for decades. You can't just throw that away overnight. Even for Kathy's sake, maybe don't make things so final. Mom just passed. This really isn't the time for divorce. It'll just look so ugly. She gave a small, nervous smile and added, you know what they say, happy families, happy lives. I looked at her and said coldly, Jane, let me ask you something. When your mom was bedridden and needed constant care, where were you? How many times a year did you visit? Funny how no one was quoting family values back then. My voice was low and steady, every word sharpened like it had been honed against 10 years of silent resentment. And now that your brother wants to throw me out like yesterday's trash, you want to talk to me about grace? About forgiveness? You've got some nerve. This house was purchased after we got married. Every cent in those accounts, retirement funds, investments, savings. I contributed to all of it. I'm taking what's legally mine. No one is going to guilt me into walking away empty-handed. She looked stunned, mouth slightly open, completely caught off guard. But no words came out. Finally, she stood up awkwardly. I just thought maybe you two could talk things through. It doesn't have to get ugly. Ugly? I scoffed. He used me like a nursemaid for 10 years and now wants to toss me out like a broken appliance, and I'm the one making it ugly? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Well, I guess it's up to you too, she mumbled before grabbing her bags and making a hasty exit. After that, everything moved into legal proceedings. Following a recommendation from the community mediator, we both hired attorneys and a full asset evaluation began. The house was currently worth about $700,000. Robin couldn't afford to buy me out, so he had no choice but to agree to list it. The net profit would be split evenly. Our bank accounts, mutual funds, and investment portfolios were all properly reviewed and divided by the legal team. I made sure to reclaim the jewelry I brought into the marriage along with the heirloom bone china set. They might not worth much, but they were a part of my history, pieces of a self I wasn't going to let vanish. On the day we signed the divorce agreement, we met at the family law office in the LA County Courthouse. The air conditioning was blasting, but I didn't feel cold at all. Robin sat across from me, eyes darting. His hand trembled slightly as he signed. There was something unreadable in his expression. Maybe regret, maybe just the fantasy of newfound freedom. I couldn't tell anymore. And I didn't care. I checked every page, every line of the agreement like I was reviewing a business ledger. The numbers, the clauses, everything had to be exact. Once satisfied, I picked up the pen and signed my name on the official divorce decree. The scratch of the pen against the paper sounded like the final stamp on a failed marriage. When I stepped outside the building, the sunlight was blinding. It was one of those dry, scorching Los Angeles summer afternoons. Even the breeze felt like steam. But somehow I felt lighter, like a weight I'd carried for years had suddenly lifted. The marriage certificate we once proudly filed away had now been replaced by a thick stack of court documents. Some might see that as a symbol of failure. But to me it felt more like a reset button, like wiping a phone back to factory settings. The memories were gone, yes, but so was the endless lag. I headed toward the bus stop without looking back. I heard Robin call my name behind me, quiet, hesitant, tinged with something that sounded almost like regret. But I didn't stop walking. In that moment the burden slipped away. What comes next? I don't know. But for the first time in a long time, I get to live for me. With the money I'd received from the divorce, I rented a small one-bedroom apartment in a quiet older neighborhood on the South Bay side of San Francisco, about a 10-minute drive from Kathy's office. The place wasn't big and it showed its age. The kitchen tiles were yellowed with time, and the balcony railing had chipped paint. But it faced south and sunlight poured in all day long. I hired a handyman from the neighborhood to repaint the walls in a warm beige. I put up soft cotton linen curtains with delicate pinstripes. I didn't buy much furniture, just the essentials. A small bed, a writing desk, a dining table for two, and a cozy recliner. Everything was simple but clean and comforting. On moving day, Kathy came over with two of her coworkers to help. The three young women filled the apartment with laughter, carrying boxes and teasing me about my seasoned pots and pans, saying I had the most lived-in kitchen vibe. I laughed, shaking my head, watching them bring life into this empty new space. My heart was a strange mix of emotions. For the first time since I got married, after all these decades, I had a place that was truly mine. No mother-in-law to care for. No man to wait on. No midnight alarms to change diapers or turn bodies. No one's moods to tiptoe around. When her friends left and the apartment finally quieted down, dusk had already fallen. Kathy rolled up her sleeves and helped me unpack. She hung my clothes in the closet while I carefully placed a few heirlooms from my own mother into the top drawer of the vanity. An old silver necklace dulled with age, a tiny ring, a jewelry box with a broken hinge. Then, out of nowhere, she wrapped her arms around me from behind like she used to when she was little, resting her head on my shoulder. "Mom," she said softly, "don't worry. Everything's going to be okay." I froze for a second, then smiled and patted her arm. "I know," I said. "I really do." The apartment was small but quiet. The windows were clean, the sunlight perfect. I brewed a pot of chamomile tea, then sat out on my tiny balcony in a folding chair, gazing down at the street below. Kids rode by on bikes. A group of silver-haired women were walking their dogs. Farther down the road, someone had set up a table on the lawn to sell homemade jam. And in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. And more than that, freedom. I pulled out a pen and notebook and carefully wrote down 4 goals for my new life. First, find a light, low-pressure job, not just for income but for structure. Somewhere to go, something to do. I didn't want to rot behind 4 walls again. Second, reclaim the hobbies I'd abandoned under the weight of survival. Maybe watercolor painting. Maybe a flower arrangement class at the community center. Maybe learn to bake something simple. Third, reconnect with old friends. The women I'd grown apart from because of marriage, kids, or just life. It was time to reach out again. I couldn't keep living like an island. Fourth, learn to love myself. Really love myself. Take care of my body. Exercise a little. Get better. Learn how to dress for me. I wanted the woman in the mirror to look not just like someone getting by, but someone actually enjoying her life. Of course, there were lonely moments. Nights on the couch, flipping through channels and finding nothing worth watching. Those moments could feel hollow. After all those years of non-stop chores, complaints, noise and conflict, the sudden stillness could feel strange. Like I didn't know how to exist in the quiet. But more often than not, what I felt was a quiet, steady kind of contentment. A calm I hadn't known in decades. The feeling that, for the first time, my life was entirely in my own hands. I used to think a home was a safe harbor. But now I understand, it was a war zone I was holding up on my own. This little apartment may only be 600 square feet. The kitchen barely fits 1 person. But every storm that comes my way, I can weather it. And more importantly, I make the rules now. And honestly, that feels pretty damn good. In the days following the divorce, Robin did manage, briefly, to live the life he had always imagined for his freedom-filled second act. No more aging, bedridden mother. No more wife who, in his mind, was always uptight, always nagging, always smothering. The house was finally quiet. No one reminding him to take his meds, check the milk's expiration date, or pick up his socks. The air itself, he thought, felt different, crisper, like a breath of fresh air on a mountaintop. He started calling up old buddies for drinks and poker nights. On weekends he drove out to Marina Bay to fish alone, spending the whole day casting lines and posting filtered photos with captions like, "Finally doing what I love." He joined several dating apps, even asked friends to introduce him to women, fantasizing about a second spring with someone who would appreciate him. Someone softer, more gentle, who would help him rediscover his charm. Reality, however, slapped him hard and fast. Within a few days, the house had completely fallen apart. The couch in the living room was buried under used shirts, socks, and his fishing vest. Laundry sat soaking in the washing machine for 2 full days before he remembered to turn it on. The sink was piled high with greasy takeout containers and leftover pasta, and the air had taken on a rank, sour stench that clung to everything. Meals? Burgers or frozen pizza? The sugary sodas from combo meals left his stomach churning. Less than 2 weeks in, his digestive system revolted. One night, a wave of sharp pain seized his gut. He collapsed onto the bed, curling into himself, drenched in cold sweat. He tried to sit up and reach for his meds, but his hand trembled, knocking over a glass of water that shattered on the floor. And that's when it hit him. There was no one to help him. He fumbled for his phone and called 911. The paramedics took him to the nearest ER. He went through it all alone. Check-in, blood work for drips. He lay curled on a hospital cot under fluorescent lights, watching the patients around him get visited by sons, daughters, spouses. People held hands, asked doctors questions, brought blankets and snacks. Robin? Not a soul. No one asked how he was feeling. No one touched his hand. No one even knew he was there. That cold, humming ear was the first place he truly felt what it meant to be alone. As for that grand second spring, it never got off the ground. His dating profiles read like a resume for a late middle-aged man selling himself. Stable income, loves fishing, independent, seeking companion to share life's journey. But the moment women found out he was in his 60s, freshly divorced, had sold his house and split the assets, and had played zero part in caring for his mother before dumping his wife just days after the funeral, they swiped left. Or replied politely, "You seem nice, but we're not a match." The few who agreed to meet in person quickly realized the red flags. He couldn't stop talking about himself, especially how misunderstood he'd been. He expected women to order for themselves, sighed if they chose more than one item, complained about rising prices and never once offered to pick up the check. Later he started critiquing women's appearances. His tone grew sharper, more bitter. Not one date ever made it to a third round. Most ended with him getting blocked. Each rejection sent him deeper into himself. He'd sit alone, drinking whatever was cheapest, beer, bourbon, bottom-shelf whiskey. Staring at the blank TV screen in his living room, the remote tossed aside, no one around to hand it back. He thought divorce would be the beginning of a new chapter. A return to being a real man, free and unburdened. But what he'd actually walked into was hard mode. A solo campaign in a life he was never equipped to manage. He never understood that all the order, all the peace, all the small comforts he took for granted had never been effortless. They weren't natural. They were built, deliberately, daily, by the very woman he'd dismissed as draining and unnecessary. And when she left, she took it all with her. The warmth, the rhythm, the quiet, unseen care that made that house a home. Only then did he begin to grasp the truth. The woman he had so casually cast aside was the one holding the whole thing up all along. Meanwhile, my own life had quietly started to unfold in a new, lighter direction. Thanks to Kathy's recommendation, I landed a part-time job as a librarian at a small community library near her office. My days were simple: reshelving books, logging check-ins and returns, and occasionally helping kids find their next favorite story. The work wasn't stressful and the environment was peaceful. Outside the windows stretched a lawn and neatly trimmed shrubs, and the building always carried that comforting scent of paper and worn book covers. No office politics, no sales quotas. I even had time to flip through the new arrivals. For me, it felt like the perfect job. I remember my first day. I was nervous. I ironed my shirt 3 times and arrived 30 minutes early, pacing outside like a student on the first day of school. The head librarian, a warm-spirited older white woman named Patricia, welcomed me with a kind smile and a gentle pat on the shoulder. "Welcome, Linda," she said. "People who love books usually know how to keep life in good order." I smiled. And in that moment, it felt like something soft and steady unfurled inside me. With a new routine in place, I started reaching out to a few girlfriends from my younger days. Some had moved to Santa Clara, some volunteered in their neighborhoods, others were helping raise grandkids, but we had never truly drifted apart. I started a group text and soon we were all chatting again, about which grocery store had the best deals, whose new neighbor blasted rock music at 8 a.m., who pulled a muscle in Zumba class from shaking too hard. We talked about everything. On weekends, we'd meet up to browse local strip malls, picking out cute sale rack blouses and sharing lattes at cafes with patio seating. Sometimes we'd reminisce about sneaking into movie theaters as teens, laughing until our eyes teared up. On sunny days we took classes together at the community center. Zumba, stretching, yoga. I was totally off rhythm at first, always a beat behind, cheeks burning with embarrassment. But my friends would just laugh and shout, "Linda, forget the moves. Just follow the beat and sweat it out." Bit by bit I let go. I stopped worrying about looking silly and started having fun. After every class I felt lighter, like I'd shaken off years of weariness from my bones. Outside of exercise, I also enrolled in a watercolor class at the Adult Learning Center nearby. Twice a week I joined a group of women around my age, gathered around easels, practicing shading, color blending, sketching. At first I couldn't even tell the paint tubes apart. My apples looked like soggy tomatoes. But week after week I improved. My colors grew richer. My lines stronger. My paintings started to have structure. There was something deeply satisfying about starting from scratch and learning a new skill. Something just for me. At the library, one of the younger coworkers joked, "Linda, you've been glowing lately. You look younger than my mom." I just smiled and didn't say much. But I knew the truth. That glow didn't come from makeup. It came from life, finally filling me back up. I used to revolve around a kitchen. Now I revolve around myself. Around my interests, my energy, my joy. And honestly, no investment pays off better than investing in yourself. Sometimes I post snapshots on Facebook. A landscape I've painted, a group photo after yoga, and people comment, "You look so vibrant. You're glowing." It's not vanity. It's validation. A quiet kind of affirmation. My days now have rhythm, substance, and a sense of anticipation. Not for anyone else. Not to meet anyone's expectations. But simply for me. This peace, this ease. It didn't come easily. But now that it's here, I'm holding on to it with both hands. When it rains, it pours. Things started falling apart again for Robin. In the first few months after the divorce, he lived off the high of so-called freedom. His routines went completely off the rails. Meals at odd hours, sleep patterns flipped upside down, and a steady slide into emotional lethargy. By autumn, when the Bay Area mornings and evenings turned crisp, it finally caught up to him. He came down with a nasty cold, coughing, feverish, runny nose, and spent 5 straight days in bed. No doctor. Just over-the-counter cough syrup and stubborn pride. There was no one to make soup. No one to bring him water. If he wanted something hot to eat, he had to order delivery, lukewarm meals with no flavor, hard to swallow even when he was hungry. He lay curled on the couch, too tired to turn on the kitchen light, the emptiness in his chest deeper than he could admit. And just a few days after he'd recovered, his old nemesis came back, his herniated disc. Back when it flared up before, I'd get up in the middle of the night to apply heat packs, rub in ointments, help him stretch, ease the pain. Now he couldn't even get out of bed without bracing himself. One night he tried to bend over and tie his shoes, and collapsed in pain, kneeling on the floor, drenched in cold sweat. That was the moment it hit him. This free life he'd been so sure he wanted was nothing like the fantasy. Hospitals were still as overcrowded as ever. Long lines. Long waits. Long bills. He hobbled in on a cane, sat slumped in the waiting area, and watched other patients surrounded by spouses, children. Someone. He didn't even have a bottle of water in his hand. All those things he once called annoying, suffocating, unnecessary, the care, the comfort, the presence, had turned into memories that now felt unbearably tender. And completely out of reach. The early relief of divorce had long since washed away, eroded by pain and loneliness. Now he wasn't sure anymore. Had he been too impulsive? Too blinded by emotion? He started calling Kathy again. At first, the conversations were casual, checking in on her work, asking about her schedule. But over time his tone changed. A little softer. A little more hesitant. "How's your mom doing these days?" he asked one evening. Kathy's voice was cool, measured. "She's doing well." 3 simple words. But they were a wall, firm and unmoving. "That's good. I mean, she's living alone now. Is she getting used to it? Does she need anything?" "She has me, Dad." Kathy's voice cut clean, no hesitation. "She's doing fine. She's taking classes at the community center, goes out with friends, comes over for dinner sometimes. She's happy." Robin paused, then lowered his voice. "Has she ever mentioned me?" There was silence. Then Kathy said, her voice firmer than he'd ever heard it. "No. And Dad, look, I know you're lonely. I get that. But please don't try to reach out to her again. For the first time, she's living a life that's actually hers. Just let her have that." Her words hit him like a bucket of ice water dumped over his head, dousing the last flicker of hope. That's when he finally understood. What he'd lost wasn't just a wife. It wasn't just someone who cooked and cleaned and looked after his mother. He had lost the only person who had ever stood by him without complaint for years. And he'd lost his daughter's respect along the way. He'd never imagined that one day even his relationship with Kathy would feel formal, distant, as if blood still bound them, but something deeper had come undone. That's how it is with people. When you're right there beside them, they say you're in the way, too much, too loud, too clingy. But when you leave, really leave, and take your silence, your softness, your steady hands with you, they realize the world won't slow down to wait for them. It won't rewind to that dinner table. It won't offer second chances just because they regret it now. And the cruelest part of regret? It never echoes back. Meanwhile, my life was blossoming, vivid, full of color, and louder in all the best ways. At the community library, I took my job seriously, greeted everyone with warmth, and soon became a favorite among the regulars. "Miss Linda," they called me. Some of the older patrons would even bring homemade treats just for me, saying the books I recommended worked better than any prescription. Not long ago, the watercolor class I'd been taking held a small community art exhibit. One of my landscape paintings was unexpectedly chosen as an outstanding work. The prize was modest, a set of paints and a few new brushes, but the certificate with my name on it now hangs proudly on my refrigerator. Every time I pass by, I can't help but smile. It was a kind of happiness I hadn't felt in years. One rooted not in roles or obligations, not in someone else's approval of my sacrifices, but in something I had built with my own hands, through my own passion and effort. My own light. I also joined a neighborhood morning dance group, technically a Zumba and Latin cardio team that meets in the park at dawn. The ringleader is a woman named Sharon, always full of energy, always in the brightest workout gear, leading from the front with a grin that could power a city block. When I first joined, I stayed in the back, stiff and unsure of my moves. Sharon spotted it right away. After class, she pulled me aside and said, "Linda, loosen up. Nobody cares if you're on beat. Just dance for fun." He was right. After a few weeks, I found my rhythm. My body remembered how to move. One day, Sharon even teased, "You've got coordination, girl. If we ever put on an end-of-year show, don't be surprised if I make you co-captain." I laughed and shook my head, but deep down I felt warm all over. It turns out, even in midlife, you can still find your people. People who make you feel like you belong just as you are. With my energy up, my glow followed. Even the neighbors started noticing. The cashier at the local grocery store once complimented me, saying I looked like an artist from the East Coast, maybe New York or something. One afternoon, a friendly woman from the next block caught up to me while walking her dog. "I know a retired teacher," she said. "He lost his wife a long time ago. Quite kind. Want me to introduce you?" I smiled and politely declined. It wasn't that I was closed to love. It's just that this single life? It was really good. I didn't have to compromise. I didn't have to tiptoe around anyone's moods. I was free, truly free for the first time in decades. After living through a marriage where the scales were never balanced, I finally understood what I wanted. Not romance. Not dependence. But respect. Understanding. Wholeness. I also started caring about how I looked. Not for anyone else but for me. I used to wear the same shirt for 3 years. My skincare was whatever was on sale at the drugstore. I'd leave the house without even brushing my brows. But now, I pick clothes in colors and cuts that flatter me. I invest in good skincare, clean formulas with solid reviews. Sometimes I wear a little makeup. A touch of lipstick. Just enough to feel fresh, polished, present. When Kathy and I go shopping in San Francisco, she hands me dresses over the changing room door, saying, "Mom, this one's perfect for you." Elegant and classy. A few times when we've walked side by side through the mall, people have mistaken us for sisters. And every time I laugh, genuinely, joyfully. Not out of vanity but because I believe it now. I stand in front of the mirror and see a woman with glowing skin, bright eyes, and a strong, upright posture. A woman I once dismissed 10 years ago as just another invisible middle-aged housewife, now looking vibrant. Even beautiful. I used to think aging meant fading. That it meant retreating, saving, staying home to cook and raise grandkids quietly in the background. But now I know the truth. If you're willing to care for yourself, spend time, spend energy, spend money on your own well-being, then 65 is just the beginning. You can still bloom. You can still shine. You can still be your own version of a luxury, flourishing life. Not borrowed. Not gifted. Not granted by anyone's permission. You earn it. You own it. You bloom all by yourself. Fate has a twisted sense of humor sometimes, almost theatrical in its irony. That afternoon I was at the Whole Foods near my apartment pushing my cart through the aisles, picking out fresh organic produce. I just turned the corner from the refrigerated section when I saw a familiar silhouette standing by the ready-to-eat meals. It was Robin. He looked noticeably thinner, his skin dull and sallow. Deep bags under his eyes, a scruffy, half-shaven chin. His jacket was faded to a tired gray, and his sneakers, filthy and cracked along the sole, hung loosely on his feet, one shoelace barely tied. He stood there holding a cup of low-sodium instant noodles, hesitating like he was mentally calculating whether it fit the budget. Me. I was wearing a navy blue dress, a crisp, clean coat, light makeup, and my hair, freshly trimmed and colored last week, framed my face just right. My cart was full of vibrant fruits, salmon fillets, mixed nuts, and leafy greens. My skin glowed. My eyes were bright. I looked like I had somewhere to be, and I did. A good life. When our eyes met, he froze. He hadn't expected to see this version of me, not the tired, stretched-thin housewife from his memory, but a woman polished, radiant, and alive. I saw it in his face. The flicker of surprise, discomfort, embarrassment, maybe even envy. Or regret. The contrast between us was so stark he couldn't hide it. He instinctively tried to step aside, but it was too late. He set the noodles down like they'd burned him, rubbed his hands together and forced a crooked smile. Linda, what are the odds? You shopping too? My voice was calm, my gaze gliding past him without lingering. Not warm, not hostile. Just polite. Detached. He chuckled awkwardly, still trying to find footing. You've been doing well? I have. I nodded, smiling gently but firmly. Thanks for asking. I reached for my cart, ready to move on. Wait, Linda, hold on. He stepped forward quickly, blocking my way. Kathy, how's she doing? I stopped. She's doing great. I looked him square in the eye, steady and unflinching. Work's going well, she's happy and her life's full. He pressed his lips together, clearly searching for another thread to pull, something to keep the moment from slipping away. But I was done offering time I no longer owed him. I raised my chin slightly, my voice soft but absolute. Mr. Whitaker, unless there's something else. I have plans. Enjoy your shopping. Mr. Whitaker. 2 words. Cling. Pulled. Final. They shattered whatever fragile familiarity he thought still existed between us. His face froze, mouth slightly open, words caught in his throat. After a beat, he gave a slow, wordless nod and stepped aside. I pushed my cart past him without a second glance. I saw everything, the awkwardness, the discomfort, the quiet desperation, but truthfully I felt nothing. No sympathy. No anger. Not even satisfaction. Just indifference. The kind you feel when running into an old client you barely remember. You nod if at all and move on. Maybe he thought I'd fall into some tired movie scene trope. Eyes brimming with tears, choking on old memories, maybe even asking if he'd ever come back. Sorry to disappoint. I'm too busy living well to rehearse the fantasy of the woman who never got over her ex-love. In this life, the greatest luck isn't about who you meet. It's knowing when to walk away. His ruin? That's on him. My glow? I fought for it. He thought I'd have nothing once he left? He couldn't have been more wrong. Leaving him was when I finally had it all. That chance encounter at the grocery store? It turned out to be the final straw that broke Robin's already crumbling illusion. He really saw me for the first time in years. Radiant, self-assured, glowing with the kind of freedom he never thought I'd have without him. And then he saw himself, gaunt, disheveled, shoes coming apart, clutching a cup of instant noodles like it was a life decision. The contrast was blinding. It shattered whatever fantasy he'd been clinging to, that I'd fall apart, that I couldn't possibly live without him. Regret. Bitterness. Jealousy. They wrapped around him like snakes, coiling tighter with each breath. And from that moment on, his life took a steep, merciless nosedive. Not long after, he sunk what little money he had left, his share from the house sale, into a can't-lose investment, tipped off by one of his poker buddies. A so-called inside opportunity. Within a month, the company vanished. Doors locked. Phones disconnected. Every penny gone. His already tight finances flatlined overnight. And then his back gave out again. The herniated disc he used to ignore became unbearable. Some nights, the pain was so intense he couldn't even roll out of bed. The doctor told him he'd need surgery, followed by weeks, maybe months, of rest and rehabilitation. When he heard the cost, he practically choked. See, back when the little problems showed up, I was there. I'd stay up all night with heat pads, rub in ointments, help him stretch, call the doctor when he wouldn't. But now, without me, even basic survival was out of reach. He started to panic. Truly panic. First, he tried calling those old drinking buddies. The ones who used to call him brother over shots of bourbon. He reached out one by one, asking for a loan, a couch to crash on, someone to help him out for a few days. And one by one they ghosted. Some didn't pick up. Some replied with, "Man, things are tight right now." Most just left him on read. The poker table had emptied out. That's what real loneliness looks like. Not when there's no one to drink with, but when you're lying on the floor in pain and no one will bring you a glass of water. Only then did he understand what real coldness felt like. He used to think he was the man of the house, the pillar, the one holding it all together. Turns out he was dry rot. And when he cut me loose, the real foundation, he never imagined the whole damn house would collapse. Out of options, he turned back to me. First it was subtle. A few messages, a couple of missed calls. Hey, hope you're doing okay. Working too hard lately? I ignored them. Then came the sob stories. He'd lost everything. The investment failed. His back was shot. He couldn't walk. He couldn't cook. He was living off cold food and cold silence. Let's be honest, he wasn't confiding. He was fishing. Hoping I'd take the bait. Hoping I'd swoop in, care for him just for a few days, maybe send some money. Play nurse. Play wife. I didn't even open the messages. So he started calling the library where I worked. One day I picked up the phone just to end it. Robin, I said, calm but sharp, we're divorced. Legally, emotionally, completely. Your illness, your debt, your loneliness, they're not my burden anymore. Stop calling. Don't contact me again. 3 seconds of silence. Then the line went dead. A few days later he was back. This time he dropped all pretense. Long texts. Paragraphs about our sweet years, how he still dreams of us cooking together in the old kitchen, how thoughtful and gentle I used to be. He even quoted that old, tired line. 1 day of marriage is worth 100 days of grace. 100 days of marriage is as deep as the sea. I almost threw my phone. Then came the guilt trip. Linda, I know I didn't cherish you. I made mistakes. But who hasn't? Can you really stand by and watch me fall this far? Think about Kathy, she's caught in the middle. Doesn't her heart hurt too? I laughed. Loudly. And I replied with zero hesitation. Robin, where was that 100 days of grace, when I spent 10 years wiping your mother's body and feeding her by hand? She wasn't even buried before you served me divorce papers. Did you think about marital love then? Now you're broke, sick, alone, and suddenly I matter again? Please. I'm not your backup generator. I'm fully charged, but not for you. You want to talk about love? About memories? That ship didn't just sail, it sank. My love for him died somewhere between changing his mother's diaper and hearing him say, this marriage just isn't working. Now he wants to revisit our past? Sorry. My compassion credit lines long overdrawn, and permanently closed. No renewals. No forgiveness specials. No comeback tours. Robin wasn't done. When guilt and nostalgia failed, he tried the next tactic in his playbook, the backdoor route. He went to Kathy. Tears streaming, voice trembling, he played the helpless card, told her his back pain was unbearable, he couldn't cook, his money was gone, and he just couldn't go on like this. He begged her to talk to me. Just to convince me to come by. Just for a few days. I know I messed up with your mom. I let her down, and I let you down too. But I've got nothing left. Please talk to her. Just ask her to pity me if nothing else. I'm not asking for forever. Just a little help. He let go of every last shred of fatherly dignity, groveling in front of his own daughter. Kathy looked at him, really looked, and something flickered in her eyes. But her voice remained steady, unwavering. Dad, I can help pay for a caregiver. I'll even look into a decent assisted living facility. Supporting you is part of my duty as your daughter, and I won't turn away from that. Then she paused. Her voice sharpened. But don't even think about dragging Mom back into this. She's finally breathing again after giving up everything for you. Leave her alone. He didn't yell. She didn't cry. But that calm finality hit harder than any outburst. When that didn't work, Robin turned to Jane, his ever-sympathetic sister. He wept, dramatized, and spun his tale. How he was sick, broke, alone. How I had turned cold, abandoned him, pretended he never existed. How I was living it up while he was forgotten. Jane, bless her soft heart and church-influenced guilt complex, got pulled right in. She knew I'd suffered plenty in that marriage. She'd seen her brother's faults firsthand. But still, he was her brother. And all those sermons about forgiveness and grace had planted their little seeds. So she showed up. With a cake box in hand, she sat on the edge of my spotless sofa like she didn't quite belong. Linda, she began hesitantly. I know my brother, he's done a lot wrong. And I'm not excusing it. But he's in a really bad place right now. Can't even feed himself. I just thought, maybe, just maybe, you could be the bigger person. You were married once. I was seated at my desk, practicing watercolors. I set down my brush and looked up at her, calm, composed, deliberate. Jane, I said, voice even, The words, "be the bigger person," sound noble. But tell me, where were you the day he asked for a divorce? His mother had just died. And all he could think about was leaving me. Did you tell him then to think about the years of marriage? Her face tensed. I continued. He's Kathy's father. She'll do what she needs to. But me? I'm no longer his wife, by law, by emotion, by anything. The mess he's in now? That's his to clean up. I'm not stepping back in. You're welcome, I added, to repeat that to him word for word. Her expression faltered. It was like I'd slapped her with facts too sharp to dodge. She lowered her gaze and sat quietly for a moment. Then she let out a breath. You're right, I guess. I was too close to him to see clearly. I didn't think you'd really let go. I smiled gently. Letting go doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It means I've finally heard enough. Something shifted in her then. Real remorse, maybe even a little clarity. She stood to leave, and her voice this time carried no persuasion. Take care of yourself, Linda. That meant more than any of her previous appeals. It was the first time it felt like she truly saw me, not as Robin's wife, but as me. I held no bitterness toward her. Everyone has their own journey to understanding. Some people just take a little longer to turn around. But my boundaries? They were already set in stone. And I made it clear, to Kathy, to Jane, to anyone who thought they could push me back toward that door. First, I would never remarry Robin. Second, I would never return to being anyone's unpaid caretaker. Third, the woman I was is in the past. The life I live now, it's mine. And I won't allow anyone to disrupt it, not for love, guilt, or memory. I even consulted a lawyer. Asked about filing a protective order. If he contacts you again, shows up, sends messages, harasses you in any way, she said, you have every right to demand he stay 100 feet away. One incident is enough. I gathered the documents, saved the steps, prepared myself. Then I looked Kathy in the eye and told her without a shred of hesitation. If he crosses the line again, I won't hesitate to call the police. Kathy nodded. This time, Mom, we guard your peace together. After that, Robin went quiet. Maybe he realized the pity cards had all been played. Maybe he finally understood the door he kept knocking on had been locked for good. Maybe he knew she's really not coming back. But I knew that man too well. His bitterness didn't vanish. It just sank beneath the surface, like embers under ash. Waiting for a breeze. Waiting for a chance. But me? I'm done playing fire marshal in someone else's life. I've learned this much. My kindness isn't a bottomless pit. My forgiveness isn't a revolving door. And my easygoing nature? That's reserved only for those who've earned it. As for the people who treated me like a rag to be used and tossed, sorry. I don't do recycling. Maybe it was the cold, relentless silence I gave him. Maybe it was the mirror I held up with my refusal to play his games. Whatever it was, Robin cracked. And what he did next was, without a doubt, the most pathetic and self-destructive move of his entire life. He took to the internet. Everywhere. He plastered our old photo. One taken years ago in the backyard, back when I was still smiling beside him, my arm draped over his shoulder, the sun glowing behind us and that long-sold house in the background. That image became the banner for his pity campaign. From Facebook community groups to local neighborhood forums to his church's mailing list, he posted variations of the same sob story. 30 years of marriage gone just like that. I admit I wasn't perfect. But who is? Now I'm alone in pain, no family nearby. I'm not asking for money. I just want to come home. He painted himself as a heartbroken, abandoned old man. Carefully worded. Carefully edited. He knew what he was doing. He was casting himself as the victim, and me as the cold-hearted woman who forgot him the moment life got good. And at first it worked. Some people took the bait. Comments trickled in. This is heartbreaking. No matter what happened, no wife should let her husband fall this far. I knew him a little. He always seemed so laid back. How did it come to this? Linda should at least go see how he's doing. It's the decent thing to do. A few even forwarded the post to me directly with messages like, your ex seems to be in a bad place. Maybe you could just check in. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel anxious. What I felt was tired. Not of defending myself, but of how quickly people abandon basic critical thinking in favor of a good sob story. But I didn't stay quiet. I didn't call anyone. I didn't DM or whisper behind closed doors. Instead, I picked two of the most active platforms where his post was gaining traction, and posted a single public reply. Polite. Precise. Not one insult. But every word carved from truth. Thank you all for your concern. I'd like to clarify a few facts for context. First of all, Robin and I are legally divorced. All assets were divided by law. And secondly, I personally cared for his bedridden mother for 10 years. He was rarely present. Not to mention that he filed for divorce 5 days after his mother's burial, stating that I was no longer useful. I've never spoken ill of him. I only ask that the loudest voice not be the most dishonest. If you truly care for his well-being, consider bringing him meals, helping with medical costs, or hiring a nurse. As for me, I won't look back. I don't recycle. Not a shred of venom. But every line was a hammer. And just like that, the tide turned. Comments flipped almost overnight. 10 years of care and he leaves her? That's not cold. That's clarity. I fell for it. I feel stupid now. Good women these days have to defend themselves because no one else will. He didn't mention the failed investment, or the fact he split the house money. Funny, right? Some of us remember the poker games and the stock tips he begged for. That's not tragedy. That's karma. Others dropped receipts, screenshots of his old group chats about gambling, failed trades, and borrowing money for can't-miss investments. The narrative he built fell apart in hours. By the third day, Robin had deleted every post, every comment, and quietly exited all the groups. His last resort, to weaponize public sympathy, blew up in his face. And with it went the last shreds of whatever public dignity he had left. But I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt clean. Because it wasn't about winning. It was about finally, laying down the weight of someone else's narrative. About no longer having to explain, justify, or absorb blame for someone who'd never earned my protection. That silence I gave him? It wasn't absence. It was closure. The day Robin vanished from social media, I knew he finally understood. He'd lost. Completely. But what he didn't see coming was that life wasn't finished with him. Not by a long shot. After his online sob story unraveled and the public sympathy turned to scrutiny, even the church he used to frequent became a place he avoided. People who once nodded politely now barely made eye contact. If they saw him at all, they quickly looked away as if shame might be contagious. Human kindness is paper-thin. One gust of truth and it tears. But even more brutal was his body. His back, left untreated for too long, couldn't take it anymore. Conservative therapy no longer worked. The doctor told him, plain and cold. Without surgery he risked partial paralysis. But Robin had no health insurance. No cash. No real friends left. In the end it was Kathy, our daughter, who stepped in. She arranged for him to be admitted into a government-subsidized nursing facility on the outskirts of the city. It was a basic place. Dim corridors, small windows, the air constantly tinged with disinfectant and overcooked rice. The kind of place where even the television had to be shared and scheduled by room number. The day he moved in, I didn't go. Kathy helped him through the paperwork, stayed while they assigned him a bed, then came home and said only one thing. He didn't say much. But his eyes, he looked 10 years older. I didn't respond. Just topped off my tea. After that he never reached out again. Kathy visits sometimes. Each time she says he's quiet. He answers the nurse's questions, takes his meds, doesn't cause trouble. He doesn't ask about me. But once she came home and sat in silence for a long while. Finally she whispered. He was just sitting there, staring out the window for what felt like forever. I've never seen him look like that. I nodded. He finally understands. Not every apology gets a listener. She didn't reply, just reached across the table and took my hand. Life by then had settled into a gentle rhythm. My job at the library remained steady. Another one of my watercolor pieces was chosen for the spring exhibit at City Hall. I met new friends through dance and fitness clubs, people who knew me not as Robin's ex-wife, but as Linda. One Saturday afternoon, Kathy and I were drinking tea out on the balcony. The sunlight was warm. A breeze stirred the small roses in my yard. I looked at her and asked softly, "When you were little, did you ever hate me?" She blinked, caught off guard. Then she shook her head. "No. I just didn't understand why you always kept quiet." I stared into my cup for a moment, then murmured, "I didn't understand either. Maybe back then, Silence was the only thing I knew. He squeezed my hand. Mom, I used to think you were standing behind me. But now I know, you were the light ahead of me. And I smiled. A real smile. One I hadn't worn in a very, very long time. Not because someone finally saw me, but because I had finally seen myself. That night I wrote something and taped it to my fridge. 65 is not the end of a story. It's where the next act begins. I'm not going back. Not because I hate anyone, but because I've finally, clearly and deeply realized I deserve a future that belongs to me. A future without pain. Without guilt. Without the quiet martyrdom of someone else's needs. Just me. And a life I've finally set on fire. For no one but myself.